Hey guys, this is Mark Goldberg here today with another exciting episode of Mark Vlogs Watches. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we go any further, please smash the like button on this video when it's over and go ahead and subscribe so we can do it again together. Now fellas, I am an unapologetic Rolex fanboy, so I've got some confessions to make. There are things about the brand that freak me out, and I'd like to talk to you about that today and get your comments about the same set of issues. But before we go on, let's go ahead and get the quick fist watch check out of the way. It's easy. I'll do all the work. And here it is. Today I am wearing a watch that, although it may not be quite as good as a Rolex Submariner, I'd say it's close enough to be worth a second look. We'll talk more about this watch a little bit later in the video. Well, what freaks me out about Rolex? First of all, admittedly, I'm a fanboy. So I'm going to confess, I don't think there's a better brand of watch in the world for my tastes. In terms of when we weigh out its brand cachet, robustness, brand recognition, and just the feeling you get when you strap on a Rolex. There's just something about the brand Rolex. But there is weirdness, there are oddities, there are conundrums and riddles and enigmas wrapped up in the entire topic of Rolex, and I guess we got to talk about some of the ones that bother or freak me out. And the first one is the Rolex Supply. It's atrocious. Every AD around the world that I have spoken with says they are receiving fewer than ever shipments of Rolex, and that those shipments are composed of skimpier and skimpier examples of the stuff that they really want to sell. So ADs are receiving fewer shipments from Geneva, and the shipments are smaller. Well, that's a problem because what it means is the cases have kind of gotten emptied out. Now, that's not new, but it has gotten actually a whole lot worse in about the last 6 months, I would say. Worse to the point where a lot of the ADs are getting calls from their reps to go ahead and take anything out of the safe that they have been squirreling away and saving, and to throw them into the case so that the cases have a little bit of action in them. They've also been asked to not sell, like if something comes in, even though if there's 3 guys on the waiting list, theoretically it should come in and go out the same day. But the ADs are being asked, if something comes in, put it in the case, leave it there for about 30 days before you let it go. So Rolex is pulling some tricks and really manipulating the AD in order to pull some tricks and make it look to the consumer like the cases are not completely empty. I mean, Rolex, guys, what are you trying to cover up? The entire issue of supply is you're doing there in Geneva, Switzerland. Okay, it has nothing to do with the AD in Orland Park, Illinois, Chicago, Detroit, Michigan, Dallas, Texas, LA. The supply of Rolex has nothing to do with those independent family jewelers or those corporate run authorized distributor or authorized dealer chains. It has everything to do with the factory in Switzerland. So one of a couple things is happening. Either demand is just up 20-fold from where it was 5 years ago and they can't keep up with it, or as I see it, this is a lot more likely, they have continued the marketing machine creating the demand, but they have just slowly tightened the screws to let fewer of these watches out of the factory. Could be some combination of those things. Definitely COVID slowed them down a little bit. The factory was closed for a solid 6 weeks, but they have been open and running at full capacity for a while. So now, I also know, and a lot of sources seem to be under the same impression, that Rolex, prior to COVID, was in the act of opening an additional factory where they could produce more movements than what they currently make. But I think it's pretty much, it seems indisputable that Rolex is also just releasing less than they used to, okay? Because every AD who used to get X is now getting half of X. ADs used to get their shipments in monthly or every other month, and now they're getting them every 3rd and 4th month. So definitely something is going on there controlled by Rolex, and it's freaking me out. The fact that the supply is down really low is of course causing the prices to rise. And that's the second thing that's freaking me out. Gray market pricing. It's absolute profiteering. Now look, this is not how to put it, this is like, rich people problems, I guess you could say. So it's not really morally and ethically the equivalent of a hurricane coming through and all the home center stores just taking a $20 sheet of plywood and marking it up to $100. It's not the moral equivalent, but economically, supply and demand, that's essentially what is happening. So the gray market is taking full advantage of the scarcity of watches, and that is driving prices up through the roof. So there are very few Rolexes available on the secondary market for less than a healthy premium over MSRP. Now, that's changed. Didn't used to be that way. It wasn't but a few years ago that you could buy a Hulk on the secondary market for less than MSRP because nobody liked it. Heck, I bought a Batman, the original Batman GMT. I bought it used from a buddy of mine, and I paid market value for it, which was about $7,700. I don't even know what they are on the gray market right now. I'm going to guess 16, 17. They fluctuate. They've been as high as 20, and then I think they dropped down to 18. And I think they've retrenched back even a little bit. But the fact of the matter is that all of these watches are available to you. You can buy any of them. You can get a Hulk now, discontinued of course, but its MSRP was around $9,000, $9,500. But you're going to spend fairly close to $20,000 to get a Hulk on the secondary market today. So short supply, great demand equals increasing prices, and that's really benefiting the gray market, I think, more than anybody else. Certainly not really benefiting the collector very much or the consumer. By the way, there are very few sweet spots left, meaning watches that you can get without paying a large premium over their original MSRP. But I still maintain that the 40 millimeter Submariner with the maxi case, if you don't already have one of those, I think that right now that's probably your best bargain on the used market, because you can pick that up for around 12 for a good example with box and papers, and it would have originally sold for around $9,000. Throw $1,000 for sales tax on there, that's $10,000. So really you're paying a premium of about $2,000 over that, and that's pretty reasonable compared with everything else. I mean, if you want to buy a Starbucks right now, you will pay a premium much larger than $2,000. So not a lot of bargains left in the Rolex field, and it's really kind of sad, freaking me out in fact, that what we're talking about, a bargain, is really a premium. It's just not as crazy a premium as if you want to buy a Panda. That's going to have a premium of, easily $10,000 to $15,000 on it. Freaks me out, man. Here's another thing that freaks me out about Rolex as a collector: box and papers. Honestly, I never really cared about box and papers all that much, because it was much more important that you had the watch. You don't wear the box, you don't wear the papers. The watch is the thing, right? But here's the thing: box and papers have become the gold standard in Rolex anymore. Not that many years ago, you might pay $300 or $400 less for a Rolex that didn't have correct box and papers with it, because you were just wearing the watch and the condition of the watch. That was really the important thing. Box and papers wasn't such a big deal. But today, the box and papers, I mean, honestly, I think on, let's say on a standard Submariner, I think that box and papers is worth about $1,000. And when we get into pricier pieces like the Batman, the Batgirl, the Pepsi, the meteorite dial stuff, the Panda, any of the Daytonas, really, I think box and papers are worth $1,000 to $2,000 more. So there were a lot of people back, if you go back 10 years, an incredible number of people threw away their box and papers. Especially they throw away the box, because why store it? And then once the warranty was up, the papers were just kind of taking up space. So people lost them, or they didn't save them. Or maybe the watch wasn't really purchased by a collector who didn't know the importance and the value of box and papers. So those kind of got separated somehow from the watch, and never shall the twain meet again in this lifetime. But honestly, if I were buying a watch now, on the gray market, let's say, or used from a buddy, if it didn't come with box and papers and it wasn't at least $1,000 to $1,500 cheaper, I wouldn't even buy it. I wouldn't touch it. And it didn't used to be that way. What used to count was the watch. But now that darn set of box and papers has reached critical importance, especially with all the super fakes and stuff out there. So I'm a little freaked out about the fact that I used to buy and sell without regard to box and papers, but I wouldn't do that anymore. Now, before I conclude, I would like to talk about this Omega Seamaster with the laser cut dial. You know, as scarce as Rolexes have got, watches like this have just climbed in importance, because if you want to scratch the itch, but you still want to get something really nice, you know, you're going to have to go outside the brand. I think this laser cut Omega, I feel like it's an incredible bargain at this point. You know, they retail for around $5,000, but you're likely to get a discount on it and find it in the fours, or on the used market in the low fours, maybe super high threes. $3,900, that might be a bit of a stretch, but $42, $44 on the used market, probably not. And guys, that's like a third of what you're going to spend in order to get even a 2012 Rolex Submariner Black ceramic. Crazy. So it freaks me out, the differential that has occurred between Rolex and certain other brands that are still quite excellent. By the way, I got this one from Nick over at Exquisite Watches. You might contact Nick. He treated me nicely on this watch, and I know he can do the same for you. All right, guys, there's a lot of good in Rolex. It's still one of the best, most robust, waterproof, easiest to buy, or no, easiest to sell watches that you're going to find, but they're not easy to buy. They're just easy to sell. My advice is, if you have one, don't sell it. You're going to have a real hard time replacing it. And honestly, that freaks me out.